We have some catching up to do. So let's go back to October when all the indicators of the economy that are standard to economists were looking worse and worse and worse. And back then, the market was reflecting that. And all of a sudden, there was a miraculous synchronization of a bunch of central bankers that came together right around the same time and started making similar comments about their willingness to turn around this anti-inflation um, parade and begin to help the economy back because in their version, inflation had been for the most part defeated and it was time to restart the economy and things were moving again. Also, almost the same week, President Xi and President Biden got together and shook hands for the first time. So obviously that was a clear signal to the market that the central banks were going to work together if necessary to ensure that the economy would not go as low as the indicators were showing that it was going to go. To stock market investors, that is great news, and that's why the stock market was rallying ever since October, right around until now. It's been on a steady straight line up. When you understand that central bankers are going to come together and help the economy in the case of a liquidity crisis or a crash, then your worst case scenario goes down a lot lower, and things can look a lot more rosy at that point when you take away that horrible scenario. So what does that mean? Does that mean that that the recession has been killed and there's no chance of that happening? Absolutely not. The economic indicators are not going down as much as they were going before. When you look at, say, credit card balances, credit card delinquencies, delinquencies on car loan payments, skipped mortgage payments, and applications for mortgages, and there's a bunch of other numbers that we've tracked that are still looking like we are on pace to face a recession. So unless central banks come in and continue to stimulate, the reality that is going to be sitting behind is going to be dire, not quite dire, but a little more difficult to handle. We're going to be slamming into a recession. So also, it doesn't help that China is really, really going through a tough recession. And this is by design, make no mistake. I think in every sense, the Chinese government has decided that they're not going to just bail out companies. And to a certain extent, it makes sense because they had such a giant housing bubble and so many little bubbles going on that it makes sense if you're a government and you're about to stimulate and about to bail out, so to speak. You don't want to do it to those zombie companies that are not producing anything to the country. Instead, you want those to burn off and then come in and participate into rebuilding a much healthier economy for the long run. The problem is that China has become such a large economy that it can have a huge impact in the rest of the world what they're doing that. So this explains why in October they were coming together, shaking hands. They're trying to make sure that market participants and the financial global system doesn't quite come to a halt by having the United States and China go through recessions at the same time. So thankfully, we got the participation of the Central Bank of Japan, European Central Bank, and others. So can we keep this party going? There's one key factor that is the most important and the least important at the same time, and that is inflation. If inflation stays this low and continues to stay low, then in theory you can continue to run a deficit. You can continue to stimulate and you can continue to run an economy that will continue to grow from that deficit spending because some of that money will come to productive businesses who will use it to innovate and grow, and that'll be good for the economy. But if inflation comes back, it'll put the brakes on it, and it'll put the brakes pretty harshly because it is very difficult to control inflation once it takes any momentum, and it pushes the central bank and the governments to really tighten the belt to control it. Think of it a lot like a fire in your home. If you put it away right away, put it out right away, you have nothing to worry about. But if you let it get out of hand, then you really have to do a lot of damage to stop it. So we're going to talk in another video about the multiple ways that inflation can come in, because there's more than one type of inflation. And even if we had a recession, inflation may not altogether go away unless some specific things are taken into account. But perhaps we don't need to be this technical. Why? Because ultimately, and this is the conclusion that we should all come to, that I keep reminding myself as well, is at the end of the day, we're not investing into the economy. We're not here as investors with our life savings. We're not here to save the economy. We're not here to influence the economy. We invest in businesses. And the key to getting through any of these large shifts that are happening where we don't know the outcome is to own businesses that are very solid, that are going to be here for the long run, and that understand how to handle an inflation, a recession, and while you do your part as an investor of holding on to those businesses. Because these businesses will have to adjust their inventories. They may have a couple of years where their sales are down because the consumer is not going to be spending as much. But the business is fine, and the businesses will still post a profit or a small loss, and their balance sheet are healthy. The great thing about a good business is that it doesn't need a bailout from the government. It doesn't need the government to stimulate with deficit spending. It just runs with its own cash flow, its own balance sheet, and it understands the very different factors that are happening and how they can affect their business. Maybe they're running lower on inventory, maybe they're not manufacturing as much, maybe they're running with tighter margins, and you've seen that. You've probably noticed that just about every company now is doing layoffs in preparation for a possible drop in sales. Just this morning, we were reading that the television broadcaster of the Super Bowl actually is doing layoffs themselves, despite record sales of TV ads and all that. So while the government is busy trying to get the economy going, while CEOs and businesses are busy trying to adjust their economy, there is no need on our behalf to really participate by trying to time the market and do other things. Instead, just ensure that you're running a really high quality, well diversified, well put together portfolio. And the most important thing from your end is make sure that your income is not at risk, that you have savings, and that you're ready. Because if a storm comes in, there will be a lot of sales, a lot of things will go on sale, and there'll be the opportunity to double down at great prices for the long run.